We must warn ourselves that the erstwhile colonial master is alive and well, subterranean and pernicious to the core. Don't delude yourselves. And remember that sometimes the disunity of Africa is big business. And if we forget that, we will once again be manipulated.
I hope you're all doing fine. Now, PLO Lumumba is one of the best pan-Africanists we have in Africa. Now, he comes out to say we black people, we people of color must unite actually to save our own continent and to save ourselves from the oppressors. Now, he comes out to say that we should join and support people like Ibrahim Traoré, who is the Thomas Sankara of this time, to actually get away from the Western countries. So let's watch this video, then have a quick discussion at the end of it. Thank you so much.
These are not coup d'etats. These are revolutions. They are revolutions because it has become obvious that those who are lackeys of France in the Sahelian region were manipulating the electoral process, were using institutions such as the judiciary for purposes of perpetuating the French agenda. And that these young men from the military came out and said, no, when the people cannot do it through traditional revolution, we are going to do it through the barrel of the gun and use the institution of the military to change the equation. And they have changed the equation. How have they changed the equation? First, they are saying we are cutting political ties with Paris. Secondly, we are cutting economic ties with Paris. We are getting out of any organization which is led by France. We are cutting off the situation that compels us to use currency that is printed in France. We are ensuring that our resources are going to be refined, and they are entering into arrangements with a number of countries, including Russia and China, to begin to build institutions and installations that are going to refine their uranium, refine their gold, so that there is value addition. What is happening in the Sahelian region is, in my submission and in the view of many independent commentators, the beginning of the total liberation not only of those countries but the former French colonies. And it is not lost on me that the leaders of those countries are sending a very clear message. They are sending the message that any institution which makes the claim that is a pan-African institution but is being controlled from outside will be defied. I remember that day, the day after the coup d'etat in Niger, and I remember the meetings that were held in Accra, Ghana, the meetings that were held in Abuja, Nigeria, the meetings that gave a 72-hour ultimatum to Niger and said, we are going to invade you, not in so many words, but we are not going to allow you. I remember the sanctions that were imposed upon Niger. And I remember all the three leaders, Traore in Burkina, and I remember the new leaders in Niger. I remember the leaders in Mali saying, we are now entering into a military pact. You attack Niger, you have attacked Mali, you attack Burkina, you have attacked Mali, and you have attacked Niger, and of course, even Dumbuya in Guinea-Conakry said, we will join you. That is a new face. It is a face that was not contemplated, and the Sahelian revolution, because it is a revolution, is beginning to redefine how former French colonies are relating with France at the critical levels, including the area of trade, including control of their militaries, including control of their language. And it is not lost on me that in Mali, they have actually declared that French is no longer the national language. Bambara is now the national language. It is a clear statement that they are beginning to regain their independence, and they are doing it in a manner that was not anticipated and in a manner that was not contemplated. It begs the question, will the men in uniform continue to be in power until kingdom come? No. They have said in Burkina, they have said in Niger, they have said in Mali, they have said in Guinea-Conakry, we are midwives. We have come here for a short time to clean up the mess that has been with us. We have come here to clean up the mess that the French have always created. We have come here to ensure that the insurgency, which is sponsored by the French in Burkina Faso, which is sponsored by them in Mali, which is sponsored by them in Niger, which is sponsored by them in Guinea-Conakry, that this insurgency will eliminate it and will introduce a new system of governance which will allow the peoples of our country to participate in their governance without being controlled from Paris. They are saying that we have been puppets for too long. We are now regaining our independence, and this revolution is a revolution which is unique, is a revolution which is being defined and refined by young Africans whose agenda is the spirit of pan-Africanism. The Sahelian revolution is a revolution which will change the continent of Africa and redefine Africa's relationship with the former colonizers. In order to understand the Sahel, we must go back to the year 1958, when Charles de Gaulle governed France. And when Charles de Gaulle and his administration took the decision that their former colonies would be granted independence, and asked that they vote no or yes. Yes, to mean that you would regain something called independence, but you would remain under France. No, to mean that the French would run away. Only two countries voted no: Algeria under Ahmed Ben Bella and Guinea under Ahmed Sékou Touré. The rest of the countries remained under the tutelage of France and have remained so, controlled politically and economically, including their currency, the CFA franc. So that recently, in the 21st century, when young men in the military took the decision that they would change things, it was something that shocked the French and shocked the world. Shocked the French because they said, we are now gaining our independence. What we had was not independence. And I listened so very keenly to Doumbouya in Guinea-Conakry. I listened very keenly to Aïta in Niger. I listened very keenly to Traore in Burkina Faso, and their message was clear. There are those who said within ECOWAS that Mali must not, when we talked about Mali at that time, they said Mali must be expelled from ECOWAS. And they came and they warned that they were going to attack Mali, but the Malians said, no, we are going to protect our newly acquired independence. The same message came from Guinea, the same message came from Niger, the same message came from Burkina Faso, and there is now unanimity within the Sahel that the time is now to redefine their relationship with France particularly. Let us understand why that redefinition of relationship is important. It is important at two levels, at the political level and at the economic level. We start with Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso is a country that was formerly known as Upper Volta. When via coup d'etat, Thomas Isidore Sankara took power in 1983, he said we must rename our country. And he renamed the country Burkina Faso. And he renamed the people the Burkinabe, the country of upright men. And he said that the time has come that we must be totally liberated from France. France has controlled how we conduct our politics. France has controlled what we sell and what we buy. France controls our money. France controls our everything. And he redefined everything. And within 5 years, we now know that Thomas Sankara and Burkina Faso as a country were liberating themselves and were capable of feeding themselves. He said we must take charge of our gold, we must take charge of our uranium. But within 5 years, in 1987, they had induced Blaise Compaoré to assassinate him. And this is always important to remember. When Isidore Sankara was told that you are going to be assassinated and the possible assassin is Blaise Compaoré, he said, Blaise is my friend. If it is Blaise whom they have hired to kill me, then I will not survive. And he did not survive. France controls the Sahel because of our resources. Then, of course, Niger. Niger is a country that is known for her uranium. Niger is a country that is known for our resources, and we know for a fact that even some of the nuclear tests that have been undertaken by the French have been undertaken in the deserts of the Sahel region. We know that that particular area is rich in all manner of resources, and the Nigerians took the decision that we are going to change this. When the coup happened, one of the things that was most frustrating was that a decision was taken that Niger must be treated differently, and people don't understand why ECOWAS reacted in the manner that it did. It was uranium. It was the uranium that is not only used in France, but is used in different parts of the world for nuclear facilities. And Niger sits upon uranium that has value that is inestimable. And the idea to ensure that Niger was ostracized from the ECOWAS community was at the behest of the French. And it is important that the Sahelians have taken the vow that they are going to protect Niger. Outside of Niger, we are also aware that the Malian regime with Assimi Goïta, who is the current president, have taken the decision that they are going to ensure that Mali, even with the sponsored insurgency, is going to remain a country that is independent. And it is not lost on me that Mali is the home of one of the most important freedom fighters in Africa, Modibo Keïta. So the spirit of Modibo Keïta is now resurgent in Assimi Goïta, and we can see that that particular country is also moving in the direction of ensuring that they are liberated from French domination. And once again, we know that Mali is a country that has a long history with Sundiata Keita, with Mansa Musa, and the Niger River flows there and supplies oil. And in the areas such as Timbuktu in northern Mali, we know that there are major resources. The same with Guinea-Conakry, which may not be described as being specifically in the Sahel, but is one of the countries that is supporting the activities that are going on in the Sahel to the extent that they are redefining how Europe, particularly France, relates with Africa. Which begs the question, what is new in Sahel? What is happening in the Sahel that is new? Is it a revival of pan-African spirit? Is it something that is going to change the complexion of that region and by extension change the complexion of the world? Commentators are now saying that while many are quick to characterize the changes in the Sahel as coup d'etats and therefore against the African Union declaration that Africa will not entertain non-unconstitutional changes of power, pan-Africanists and those who know how France is operating and has operated say these are not coup d'etats, these are revolutions. The African minister will never queue. Oh, he's anathemic. Oh, the African minister is a demigod. Oh, Africa. The African counselor in your rural home, when they go to churches, not even if it is not their denomination, they saunter to the front seats. And even our latter-day clergymen will invite them to share their wisdom with the people, even if we know that they are village fools. If there is anything that we must learn from Western Europe, is that they have gone through enough problems and they are capable of organizing their affairs and they have demystified political leadership. We must demystify political leadership going forward. And once we do that, and I think we can do it because I can now begin to see something happening in Africa. Young Africans are beginning to ask searching questions. Africans are beginning to recognize that corruption is a cancer in our body politic. They are beginning to recognize that those who want to buy their votes don't mean well for them. They are beginning to recognize that there is enough money to change their lives if the thieves are eliminated from the political arena. They are beginning to realize that commercialization of politics is a threat to democracy. They are beginning to rise up. And I think that those who have not smelled the coffee will be surprised. They will be surprised when the ground moves from under their feet. They'll be surprised when Africa begins to elect individuals who can demonstrate that they have ideas, because the politics of the 21st century is the politics of ideas and about competition of ideas. And therefore, when one is appointed into any public office because of the demands of the electorate, and this relationship between the African member of parliament or the African president and the electorate is a symbiotic relationship. It is symbiotic in a very perverse manner. And I suspect I'm misusing the word symbiotic, but I'll use it or misuse it nevertheless, to the extent that it explains my point. What happens is that it appears that the electorate has allowed the so-called leader, because many of them are misleaders, to remain in their positions of power and to acquire as much as they can on the understanding that periodically their loot will be shared with them. It is some kind of Robin Hoodism of a latter-day kind. And this Robin Hood kind of politics is a little bit different, at least from my understanding. Robin Hood robbed the rich in order to share with the poor. But our latter-day African Robin Hoods are in the business of robbing from the poor in order to give a pittance to the very poor. And this is what we are talking about today when we talk about commercialization. So that if you ask any typical African politician, how much does it cost you to be elected into parliament, they'll tell you it is in the millions. It is in the millions, and the millions they spend is perhaps 10 times more than they'll ever earn through their legitimate salaries. And I ask myself, if your salary in 5 years is going to be 1 billion Ugandan shillings, why should you spend 5 billion Ugandan shillings to get into that office? There must be something that we do not see, but you see, and I know what it is. What it is that getting into the office of the Member of Parliament, or indeed any other political office in Africa, is a guarantee that things will come. So that in many African countries, the politician is the major tenderpreneur. The politician is the gatekeeper. The politician is the one who receives the guests. He is the tax collector informally, aside from the URA. And in this regard, therefore, we must commercialize politics. We may blame the politicians, but what about the electorate? The electorate also is to be blamed. The electorate has insatiable thirst and hunger for things that they have not worked for. They have been trained and they no longer listen to ideas. My good friend Norbert Mao, who I was told was here, I do not know whether he is here, will tell you, not that I have talked to him this morning, but he'll tell you that one of the pains that one has to endure when you confront your typical African electorate is to convince the electorate that ideas count for something. Many times when you address the electorate and you are waxing eloquent, telling them, when I'm elected, I'm going to ensure that we have good health services. We are going to ensure that we have good schools. We are going to ensure that we create opportunities for innovation and invention and create opportunities for young men and women. They are waiting for you to finish. They will tell you, we hear you. We know you are going to do all those beautiful things. But in the intervening period, I must eat. And therefore, no matter how beautiful your ideas are, if you don't carry money on that day, your ideas, like the elephant before them, will never fly. Leaders who, upon ascending to power in Africa, became demigods. How many of you here will forget Mobutu Sese Seko? How many of you here will forget Jean Bedel Bokassa? How many of you here will forget Samuel Doe? And then we had the emergence of guerrilla movements where people rose against their very own who had used their positions of power to destroy what had been gained over the years. And then, in those early days, you will also...
PLO Lumumba is one of the most known pan-Africanists in Africa right now. Just because we have scarcity of those people who are standing by the motherland, that so many people who have been here, who have seen the atrocities that have been committed against humanity in Africa, still have been bribed and paid to oppose everything good in Africa. Now, I want to share with you a story of whatever many people do not know. When Ibrahim Traoré rose to power 2.5 years back, every African leader criticized him. Every African leader said we can't continue with the military coups around Africa. But you ask yourself one thing, that Ibrahim Traoré saw whatever was happening, that the president by then, who was ruling, who was the president, now he had left France, and France was committing a lot of inhumanities to the people of Burkina Faso. And the same people who are criticizing Ibrahim Traoré are people who have been in power for almost 15 to 20 years. The people who are against Ibrahim Traoré are people who have been committing election malpractice year come, year go, every election year. The same people who were criticizing Ibrahim Traoré were the same individuals who have committed so many inhumanities in their own countries, that they have left the US military bases to be built in their land. They have left the French army to dominate their land. They have left the Chinese to dominate their land, and so many other powers that are now still colonizing Africa. Now, These are the people who went and they were so bitter with whatever Ibrahim Traoré was doing. They are now quiet because Ibrahim Traoré has proved them wrong, that, you know what, I didn't come here to be a puppet. I came here to work for the people. They are now surprised, and um, they are now so quiet because the people in Africa are now supporting Ibrahim Traore. Everyone in Africa is talking about the revolutions that are taking place in the western part of the Sahel. Now, this is the hypocrisy that is in Africa. This is the hypocrisy that PLO Lumumba is talking about. Now, PLO Lumumba has been preaching about black unity. He has been giving examples that we are in Africa, and if I want to move around Africa, in 55 countries that are in Africa, I need 55 passports. That close neighbors cannot correlate, that you can't move from border to border without a passport in Africa. But if you go places like in Europe, you only need a single passport to go around 12 to 13 countries. Now, you imagine how crazy Africa is right now. That the unity that people have been talking in Africa doesn't exist. That's why we people in Africa, in the motherland, before calling on our brothers and sisters to come back, we must unite. We must fix this continent. Even if some of them are against coming to the motherland, it's because of whatever is happening. I know a lot of false news has been spread by the CNN, by the BBC, by all these mainstream media from the Western countries, but the facts still remain. We are not united. That we have 55 countries in Africa with over 1,100 local languages. Then we have 55 currencies in the same Africa. We have no single common currency in the whole of Africa. Not even three countries in Africa have united to use the same currency. That if I have to move from the eastern part of Africa to the same eastern part of Africa, I'll have to use the dollar. If South Africa was to trade with Lesotho, they will still use the dollar. If Nigeria was to trade with Ghana or Burkina Faso, they still use the dollar. How crazy this is, and we still talk of pan-africanism. We still talk of uniting Africa. This is why at a point I do agree with people like Julius Selo Malema. People might term him as aggressive and retrogressive, but some things will still stand when he says that Africa should unite, have one common currency, have one president, speak one language. This man is damn right, because what is really not happening in the motherland? Why should we have 55 currencies? And why should we use the dollar? The US is almost 2,500 miles from Africa, and we still use their dollar to transact in Africa. That we, the people in Africa, have a very dysfunctional organ called the African Union, which has never addressed any serious matter in Africa, which is now watching some of our African continents being exploited by the French, and they can't talk anything. That military bases, the US military bases are being built in Africa, and the French bases, they can't talk anything. That organ is there to conduct meetings where taxpayers' money is being misused. And when people like Ibrahim Traore say that we need to restructure the AU, we need to restructure some organs in Africa, that the ECOWAS is dead. The ECOWAS has been the key organ that the French has used to manipulate and exploit Africa. That SADC, which was meant to actually improve the trade between African continent, is now being dominated by the French people, by the Belgian people, by the Portuguese. You go and see their structural, how it is being structured, how it has been structured, and you see the key positions are being given to foreigners, which is very, very not making sense. It's very crazy to watch this, because if you go uh, to the to the European Union today, if you go to Europe, you will find no one from Africa holding a serious position in that body. It's because how do you hold a serious position in an African organ, serious institution, when you don't understand the problems of black people in Africa, when you don't understand the problems of the people of the Western, Northern, Southern, Central, and Eastern Africa. This is why when we say that we black people need to sit down, restructure the way this continent is running, actually look at the main points. The leadership structure in Africa is rotten. Most presidents are not winning those elections. They are being put there. Election malpractices in Africa is very common. That are serious key organs that should actually be led by pan-Africanists are now being given to puppets. And this is why I usually say in Africa, the number two and number three are possibly those ones who are elected to be presidents or to be leaders in Africa, because it has never been fair that when we conduct elections, the US, China, and all these other countries like France and Belgium must send their special ambassadors to come and watch over elections. Do we send ambassadors to watch over the elections? This is why when people like Selo Malema speak and everyone gets annoyed, because how are you so much concerned about Africa if you have nothing in Africa? So you are concerned about Africa because you get something from Africa, but Africans do not get nothing from you. This is why we say we must do the two sides of the story. If I get from you, you can get from me. It's a two-way traffic that do me, I do you. If you don't, I don't. This is why we must rise this continent. Before calling our African diasporans to come back, we must rise this continent. We must speak the truth. We must fix this continent. Thank you so much for having taken the time to watch this video. I appreciate so much. If it's your first time, consider subscribing, like, comment, and share the video. Thank you so much.